series of 4 videos with some questions, discussion questions. So the reason I'm sitting back here is I've got to switch back and forth between the PowerPoint and videos because I couldn't download videos. I'll let you do that. But I'm going to suggest that we join together in prayer. And I can say this in unison, assuming you can see it. Let us pray. O God, you made us in your own image and redeemed us through Jesus your Son. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which infect our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us. Unite us in bonds of love. And work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth. That in your good time, all nations and races may serve you in harmony around your heavenly throne. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. As you can see in your handout, the 4 sessions, or what they call sessions, that is basically each video, first one will be on biblical origins, and then kneeling and standing, and then kindness and calling, and then Micah 6:8. So those will be the 4 sessions. There's some description in your handout there. So this is the piece on biblical origins. Does somebody, you can either find it in your handout, or you can read it off the screen. Somebody want to read that first paragraph, and then somebody else read the second paragraph? It's on page 2 in your handout.
I can start.
Yeah.
All right.
Go.
Oh, did somebody volunteer already?
You read the first, I'll do the second, Pete.
All right. Session 1, Biblical Origins. We begin with the biblical origins of kindness, looking at teachings from both the Old and New Testaments that highlight how kindness expresses mercy, forgiveness, and compassion, plays a critical role in human interactions and our relationship with God. The Bible, while vast and complex, continually emphasizes the importance of treating others with kindness, even in difficult circumstances. Through examples like Joseph's forgiveness of his brother and Ruth's loyalty to her mother-in-law, we learn how acts of kindness transcend the harsh realities of life and reflect God's own nature.
In the New Testament, the teachings of Jesus, especially through parables, such as the prodigal son and the Good Samaritan, embody this theme of kindness. These stories encourage us to love not only our friends, but also our enemies. Paul's writings to early Christian communities further emphasize the importance of kindness, gentleness, and forgiveness as central to Christian living.
Kindness and its sort of public expression, civility, it kind of runs through the scripture like a theme, as it does in our daily lives. You know, the Bible is this enormous composite of literature and stories and history, and you can't find a section that says, you know, tell me what the Bible says about kindness. You find it interwoven between and among human beings in their interactions with one another and in their understanding of God. And so so you see it, and it can come out like a star in a dark sky, or a gentle wave of wind or water. Like, for example, in the stories of Genesis, the famous story of Joseph and his brothers, you know, Joseph had every reason to treat the brothers who had beaten him and left him for dead with disdain or with cruelty when the power dynamic had shifted, and yet instead he showed forgiveness and mercy. Or you can think of Ruth, the woman who had every reason to leave her mother-in-law behind and yet chose to follow her and to be a daughter-in-law of kindness and found her identity and her reward among the people of Israel. And the Psalms, which are these long lamenting and beautiful prayers and wonderings about where God is in times of hardship. Is God a punishing God? Is God a wrathful God? And always coming back to this theme of God being slow to anger and of great kindness, and encouraging people to be the same. I was thinking about the prophetic writings and the temptation always to interpret the signs of the times through a lens of anger and wrath, and with reason to be angry and perhaps even wrathful, but this same echoing of proclamation that God does not judge us with harshness, but with kindness, and that we are to return to this God of kindness, abounding in steadfast love. And then the passage that is at the heart of our conversation, from the prophet Micah, very clearly, succinctly saying that what the Lord requires of us is that we love justice and do kindness and walk humbly. That's all in the Hebrew text. And then when we move into the Christian scriptures, we have Jesus, who is the embodiment of mercy and kindness, in the way he treats people, the way he engages them, the stories that he teaches, stories that stand out in our memory for their kindness, for their compassion, notably the story of the prodigal son or the Good Samaritan. His teachings, not only to love those who love us back, but to love our enemies. These are like the highest of aspirations brought to us by the one who embodied and loves and forgives and offers that kindness back to us. The writings of Paul, and maybe that's where the rubber hits the road most acutely, because he's writing to Christian communities, people who are trying to get along with each other, and also to be an example and a witness to other people. And so he's constantly exhorting and encouraging people to put on love, to be kind, to understand the importance of gentleness and patience and forgiveness, and even not to take revenge when we have been wronged. Always strive to do what is good. So that's, as you can see, it's a recurring theme that just comes back to us time and time again, reminding us of a God of mercy and kindness, and the call and the exhortation to live as those people that offer kindness and mercy to the world, revealed to us in Jesus, and indeed empowered by his Spirit to be that kind of people in the world. It's an expression of love. It's a manifestation of love that is subtle. In most of its interactions, it isn't a big deal. It's just how we show up in the world in a way that makes every exchange that we have one of goodwill. It's as Joan Chittister says, the human ecology is safe with people who live in kindness. Like you can trust people who are going to, you can trust that the world is a better place when your most basic exchanges with people are ones that lift your spirit a little bit. And then you translate that into the more heated engagements, the more difficult conversations, the real struggles and debates that we have with one another, both in our relational lives, personally and politically. And when we can self-regulate to the point where we aren't reacting with our instinctual emotion, but with a mind to how our words and our actions will affect those who hear them and who see us, that's the suit that we're wearing, that allows that love to come forth.
So you've got these questions, they're on page 4. And take a quick look at them, and if there's one that grabs your attention, say, I want to talk about this, and everybody else will follow through them. Don't be shy. Mary,
There was a road that ran around Rochester, and in order to enter the road, it was your fast way around town for everything, but in order to enter the road, you had to get yourself through a very long light. And when the light finally turned green, you know, there were inevitably 6 or 7 cars, and maybe only 4 would make it. And so I was in that line, wearing my collar, on my way to it doesn't matter where I was. But guy behind me, an elder compared to me anyway at the time, hit my bumper, just rolled into it. And the guy behind him was sitting in a pickup truck. He had his t-shirt on with his cigarettes in the rolled up sleeve, one hanging out of his mouth, and his head was hanging out of this van, waiting to yell at us because we were going to cause him to miss the light. And so I got out of the car. There was no damage. The man was melting down. To him, it meant like he'd hit my car. It meant probably, you know, that he was getting old enough that he might not be able to drive. I mean, he was going completely nuts. But he was being so apologetic, and I didn't want to miss the light either. So I said, you know, it's fine, and he went on, and so I just gave him a big hug, at which point the name of the cigarette lost it. Got back in the car, we all made the light.
Did the guy with the cigarettes, did he say anything or no?
He didn't have a chance to.
You had to make the light.
so that was an example of showing kindness in a difficult situation. Number one.
That's
Anybody have one to add on to that, or another question you want to take on?
I think the response that we're seeing now, as people are giving so generously to people in California during the fires, and more locally to the fires that we had here in Colorado a couple of years ago. There's often everyone reaching out, trying to provide assistance to those in need. They're in very difficult situations. They are. And absolute strangers just reach out and open homes and give.
You know, and people in the United States really do care about each other, despite what the news says.
Yeah.
They do care about each other.
I don't think the news says we don't care about each other. We all, yeah. It says a lot of other things, but.
Remember to speak up.
I said, I don't think the news says that we don't care about each other. It says a lot of other things, but,
Right.
yeah.
I listen, when I'm in the gym and working on aerobic machines, I watch videos, and mostly I watch videos of people hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and the Appalachian Trail. And there are always people, all of the hikers comment over and over again on what are called the trail angels. These people who will pick you up and take you someplace, or they just leave food there. They don't know you from anybody. And they just go out and they do this. And, you know, unless you watch these videos, you don't hear, or you do that kind of hike, you don't hear about those acts of kindness.
I have a friend who was doing the Arizona Trail. This was last year. And she twisted her ankle. And there were 2 guys on the trail that they had been kind of walking back and forth, and they helped her get to the next train out of town. And then, of course, the angels took over and got her to the airport.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, there are angels in the Pacific Trail too that will come and help them, because she was doing that one and she had a weirdo kind of harassing her. They actually knocked on our hotel room to come in, and she had an angel come and drive her 100 miles down the road.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all over the place.
There are angels. And I think one of the things here is we got biblical mandate for that, and there's no reason why there, I need to be one too. You would say we're an angel. We're gonna move us along just because we've got some more here.
The idea is to stand with one's own convictions and to be clear about them, and also in the posture of kneeling to acknowledge the reverence and the God image in every other human being. And so to do that in a situation of intense conversation or debate, when our convictions meet equally strong convictions that are the opposite of ours, there are a couple of things to remember. One is we are most able to behave in that way when our convictions are truly ours, when they're clear and we have honed them in ourselves through long periods of reflection and learning and study and prayer, to the point where we are confident enough of our own conviction that someone else having a different point of view doesn't threaten us, right? It's when we're threatened, or when you're having a different opinion somehow negates my own, where we can get into the more heated and angry reflective response. And so the first step, I think, is the inner work required to really be clear within ourselves. At the same time, recognizing that we all get some things wrong, right? Even where we are most confident. So there's a part of our posture that is willing to listen to people who see the world differently, on the very accurate assumption that they probably have something to teach us that we're missing. Right? That we all have blind spots, and the ones who see our blind spots most clearly are the ones who see the world differently from us. So always having an ear open to what we might learn from those who see things from a different point of view. But then finally, and this is perhaps where it is the most tender and requires the most courage, when we have to stand firm in the face of outright bullying or intimidation from people who are wishing to silence those who have different perspectives. And that's when standing is the predominant posture, like holding firm, like being the domino that refuses to fall, right? Just standing there. And perhaps not needing to shout or to argue, but to be clear that, as Martin Luther said here, I stand, I have to be here. And sometimes that very standing is enough to shift the dynamic such that others are able to hear and see things differently, or not, but at least we are guarded in our integrity. And then when emotions calm down and there's room to speak, we can speak again. But so that's the standing part. And then the kneeling part is always remembering, no matter what's coming toward us, that the person in front of us is a child of God, is a person created in the image of God. And there is a certain amount of reverence afforded that person, no matter their treatment toward us or to other people. Yes, people are more likely to hear us if they're not threatened by us. They're more likely to hear us if we're curious and we're open. And we are more likely to create a space where our point of view can be heard if we can disarm the defensiveness of other people. And so kindness is very practical in that way. I often heard, someone said to me once, and I don't know, I forget who, but it said like when things are really loud and chaotic, the thing to do is to speak more softly. Because that actually gets people's attention in a different way than if you just joined the screaming. Now, obviously, there are some extreme situations where that wouldn't work, but in general, to come toward these things with the spirit of clarity and humility has the added benefit of increasing your possibilities of being heard.
Questions are on page 5, we'll take a look at them, jump in.
I think about just conversations that we all maybe might have had or have continuing to have with family members over different situations on the political side or whatever. And it's a great way to practice, in a way, how you should be to everyone outside of your family. And if you just, like she was talking about, just even pausing, right? And showing that you're willing to listen and bring the tone down in the conversation. It can change the conversation dramatically, I think, and it has. Nothing really new, it's maybe just an affirmation that what we're reading here can work, and it does work. And we just gotta have faith in that. You gotta be able to make sure that that happens on your side if it's not happening together.
I think one thing is if we can learn more about ourselves in terms of what are some triggering things that Pete was talking about discussions or conversations with family and so forth. There are so many things that could be embedded from your lifetime that you don't want to launch into a heated discussion or something, but it's some of the stuff is almost buried in your DNA. And so it takes a great deal of, if you will, kind of self-knowledge and control to move past that. But I think also what you said, and I think we all would agree with this, is that if the volume is starting to rise, if you can somehow or another dial yourself, lower your own temperature, I think it does kind of catch people's attention, and they can hear you when you're speaking more softly. They can sometimes hear you better.
I had an inadvertent conversation with a friend. She was a client and she was moving, so we were just having a goodbye brunch, which should have been just a nice little goodbye brunch, but it turned out that it happened shortly after the Stoneman Douglas shooting, and she had high school kids who were currently under lockdown. And so the conversation turned to guns. Now, I am so anti-gun that I took my kids' bows and arrows and guns away from their Lego sets. So, you know, that's where I sit. She does not. And I don't quite know how the conversation got there, but it got to that point. And what I was able to do was just zip my lip, which you know me, that's difficult, and listen to her. And what she was able to tell me, you know, my mind said, pardon the language, that's batshit crazy. But I also realized that if that belief was really in the depth of her soul and that was what was driving her life, I could see how she could connect the dots to say she needed an AR-15 or whatever those things are. It made no sense to me, except that she was able to share her immensely deep fear. And so I didn't need to tell her that I didn't like guns. She probably just knew that because of the way I walk, I don't know. But for the first time, I was really able to kind of walk in her moccasins and say, oh, okay. And so, I don't know if it helped her at all. It helped me to realize that, you know, we're not always walking from the same starting point. And so I think from that point of view, you know, I didn't need to stand firm. You know, she was saying you need to have your own conviction. My conviction wasn't shaky. But I needed to have the humility to listen to where she was coming from in order to, you know, be able to grapple with this at all.
Thank you all. Move along.
The idea is to stand. I think of kindness as an imperative, actually. You know, Jesus, there are certain things, if you're going to be a follower of Jesus, you can decide whether or not to follow him. But once you decide to follow him, there are some non-negotiables, right? And the call to love is one of them, right? It's just the way, and to be more Christ-like in our interactions does require us to guard our speech and guard our behavior in such a way that we are known, or people can see more of Christ in us, right? So that just comes with the calling of following Christ, just in everything we say and do. In terms of the vocational aspects in a broader sense, I would say to resolve, for example, to refrain from any unnecessary harmful speech, right? Which is harder than it sounds, because there's so much of, you know, of satire, of comedy, of poking fun, of political discourse that just conditions us, as you were saying, to belittle or even dehumanize those who see the world differently than we do. And so to stay in the lane, the Christ-like lane, in every avenue that we, you know, in every place we find ourselves, that's a vocation of a high order. And in a time and in a culture where it is just so easy to tear down other people, the stakes are higher. We all don't have to enter into political debates, but when we are in situations where we can speak about or with another person, to choose the kindness path is a way of responding to the call of Jesus. So yes, I would ultimately say it's a vocation, and it's simply part of what it means to bear the likeness of Christ in this world. And as all the exhortations in scripture would have us remember, it's not easy. Otherwise, Paul would have said it once and he would have been done with it, right? But he had to say it over and over and over again, which means we have to really work at this. We have to really pay attention to how we engage with others in our lives and in the world. The task of self-reflection, self-awareness, it just can't be overstated in terms of maturity in general, and then certainly Christian maturity. If you don't have a robust practice of tending to your own life, and feeding the wells that are of life and love, right? So making sure so one of the things I try to do is just pay attention when I'm depleted or tired, or that old AA saying about, be careful when you're hungry or tired, or, there's there are some times when you're going to react with less than your best self. And so to tend to those things that allow you, I'm speaking of myself now, how can I bring my best self to situations? Reflecting and confessing the times when I fail is a big one, both in my own daily prayers and in corporate prayer. Paying attention to the things I bring into my mind and into my spirit. In other words, am I reading uplifting things? Am I reading material that calls me to a higher place? Or am I reading the things or taking in the things that are just encouraging me in my most immature behaviors, right? So just watching how I take care of my own soul, allow God to speak to me. And then I would say finally to spend time with people who are not all like me in viewpoint or in place in life, or who have life experiences and things to teach me that are beyond my own realm. Those are all some of the ways that I strive to keep on the path of following Christ.
I love how the second question is worded, in what ways do you struggle with harmful speech? Does that mean my harmful speech toward other people? Or does that mean, other people's harmful speech?
Yes.
Well, one thing that I did a few years ago, a number of years ago, actually, as a Lenten discipline one year, instead of giving up something, I took up something, which was to do a conscious act of kindness every day for someone who I do not know. Whether it was letting people in line ahead of me quickly waiting at the stop sign, whether it was a kind word to a mother struggling with her kid at the grocery store, pay it forward, go through Starbucks, pay it back, pay for the next order, something every day, a conscious act. And it's just got to be a habit. And it really has stood me in good stead.
I remember when I was very early in college, and I was at a Bible college, so I was reading all this stuff and I was passionate. And I remember going to dinner with my parents, some of their longtime friends, and they were Roman Catholic. And, and I was coming from this very evangelical, and so I don't remember what I was saying, but I don't remember anything that I was saying. We got in the car to go home, and Dad's driving, Mom turns around and looks at me, she says, "Where'd you get all that stuff?" I was studying. She said, well, that's okay, believe what you want, but don't become too narrow. And I mean, that stuck with me, because I'm remembering this story, from 50 years ago now. And I wasn't aware of my harmful speech. Because I was so embroiled in the world that sort of talked this way, disregarding how somebody else might take it or hear it. So I think that harmful speech thing is really, really, really tricky.
Many times when someone is hitting me with religious thoughts, it doesn't take me very long to realize that they're expressing anger, through evangelism, if that's what it is. And you just sort of go, wow. I never was a very good evangelist, so probably that's why.
Well, I like what Nan was saying, and, she, you can reframe it, but, you took on and created something of a discipline or something of a habit that, so it became ingrained, and, we can work on that in our, in our speech, in our conversation, that, trying to do more listening and finding a way, to sometimes put a positive spin on things.
Number two, this goes back to something that she was saying about, the Christian calling of love. This doesn't have to do with that specifically, but I was in New Orleans for a conference, and there was another Episcopal campus minister there who always wore his clericals, always. And so we finished our sessions, and we were going to go to Bourbon Street, because that's what you do. And we all piled into separate taxis. And here's Kempton, and he's still got on his clericals. And it's, 9 o'clock at night on Bourbon Street. And Kempton, you can take off your coat. And he said, I don't wear this for anybody else. He said, I wear this so when I'm walking down the street and I turn and look in a window, I see what I am. As that reminder. And, I've remembered that too. It doesn't make me wear clericals on Bourbon Street, but, it is that thing that how do we remind ourselves of how we're supposed to behave as representatives of Christ.
I liked your other point too, about taking care of yourself. If you realize that you've had a miserable day and you're gonna go home and just wait for somebody in your family to do something so you can pounce on them.
I've never all been there.
But the idea of you're hungry, you're tired, it's best to take care of yourself before you engage any further in anything else.
I think just to briefly add on to that, Mary, is if the individual that you're speaking to wants to take the time out, and just say, I can't talk about this now, because whatever the situation might be, let's be mindful not to poke,
Right.
Sometimes a really helpful line is, you may be right.
Say again?
You may be right.
Oh,
Doesn't mean you agree with them,
right?
but it gives them some space and recognize, this wasn't this videotape, but recognize that, there might be a piece of me I don't understand what you're saying yet, but it diffuses the need to, kind of claw and scratch.
other thoughts on this, or should I go to the next one?
Because I'm human and because I'm easily distracted, I need touchstones, right? I need things to remind me of my call. And so the passage from Micah 6:8 could not be a more succinct, beautiful touchstone. What does the Lord require of you? 3 things: to do justice, to love kindness, walk humbly with your God. Right? Those are like, so just to think about that. This year, I've been thinking more because we, in the, the lectionary of the Episcopal Church, we're reading the book of James, or the letter of James, which is a harsh, sharp letter. He has some very strong things to say, but he's always calling us to look in the mirror, and to listen to ourselves, not to spend a lot of time criticizing other people, but to really think about, to hold our own lives in light of Christ. And so for me, the touchstone this season is be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, which is from his first chapter. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. And I just hold that in my mind. And so if I have that in my mind, if people have something that just grounds all of us in a core conviction that challenges us to bring the best of who we are to a circumstance, we will fare much better. There's also a way to listen to other people when we're making our choices in terms of political candidates or people that we want to have serve in different leadership positions, all of that, to use what's being known as like the dignity scale. I don't know if you've seen that in the public discourse this season, but to just listen for the ways that we engage one another that respect another person's dignity. And if we can listen for that, both in ourselves and in other people, and in our actions and in our words, be known for lifting the dignity scale, going up on the dignity scale whenever we are engaging. I think we show up as Christians, and in a way that creates greater possibilities for people to hear one another and to move together with a sense of common purpose. There is a strong case to be made that much of the violence in our world comes from a diminishment of human dignity. That when people feel that their dignity has been robbed from them, or they feel shamed or embarrassed or dehumanized in some way, that the response is almost always, or is predictably, one of escalating violence. And so conversely, if we can protect the dignity of those with whom we engage, and this is like both high stakes negotiations among warring partners, and also in the more mundane interactions or more normal interactions of daily life, if we can be quick to preserve the dignity of another person, that gives us a better chance of allowing them to engage with their best selves. And so because they feel safer and respected by us, right? And that goes a long way to create an environment where people can live peaceably together, even with differing perspectives, points of view. We can disagree culturally, we can disagree politically, we can disagree theologically across the spectrum of believers. But if we hold one another in high regard, regardless of those views, if we can love unconditionally the way Jesus calls us to, we can live together and we can create a peaceful or a more peaceful world without having everyone to see things the same way.
was a webinar, I think, on Monday, the Othering webinar. Did you go to that, Gary?
Yeah.
I sort of, yeah. I signed up for it and I wasn't able to go to listen to it. I mean, I planned to go back and still do plan. Yesterday or the day before, everybody who signed up, I guess, received an email accidentally from the hosts of this. Was it Eppin? It was an Episcopal webinar on othering and similar to this, only not necessarily about kindness. But anyway, I think I know the approach that was being taken during that webinar. Without having gone there, I think it was very much like this. So what happened was that somebody who I guess had attended that webinar, did anybody in the room? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get the email?
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody who attended the webinar was very angry, and the email that this person sent was not supposed to go to everybody who attended the webinar, but it accidentally did, and, which was not a big deal to me, and the other people's email addresses were all in the response, so we got to see if we want to. My point here is that this is, I'm not finding fault with any of this. This is actually going to point out I feel like my own weaknesses in these situations and how I tend to deal with them at this point in time. This person was on the attack. This person attacked, I felt like, everybody who was in that webinar, and even me in a way, and I wasn't even there. And I guess those are the situations, those are the things that, this is fine and good on a 1-to-1 basis, or a 2-to-1 or 2-to-2. I can handle those conversations. My approach is curiosity, which is always genuine. That's interesting. Where did that come from? How did you draw that conclusion? Whatever, because I am fascinated by those things. But I find myself more and more, my self-care is literally to retreat and not be in those situations. Because I feel right now, not just politically, but just because of everything in the world, I think we, maybe collectively, maybe it's just me, are experiencing this sense of malaise, somewhat exhausted, and I understand about being triggered, traumas being triggered, negative feelings being triggered within us, and it's exhausting to keep trying to not get triggered. And so my response to that is, okay, and then just I don't engage very much anymore, I guess. I just, anyway, I'm an introvert, believe it or not, so that's, anyway, play with that.
How you let it go, how you're doing, if you're doing contemplative prayer, you're trying to clean your mind out, and sort of try to take ideas that come in and then
Let go.
try to get them to float down the river or something. I wonder how you do that, and do they really, pierce your armor?
In mindfulness, with that concept, it's acknowledging that feeling and realizing that it's okay to have that feeling. And then try to let it go. But you may know that.
My spiritual director keeps telling me to do the welcoming prayer, and frankly, I hate it.
The what?
The welcoming prayer.
Not familiar.
Welcome all that.
Oh.
I welcome you, I welcome you, Ingrid, I welcome you, yeah.
Right.
It's not working for you, maybe.
Shutting the door today.
Taking the welcome mat in.
One of the things that struck me was that I'm gonna have to sit with was the baptismal promise to respect the dignity of every human being. I always translate into certain classes of people. But it's not, one of the classes that's not included in that is people with whom I disagree. And that's the thing that I'm gonna have to sit with, because they are human beings too, and I say I'm gonna respect their dignity, even if they are fill in the blank, jerks or whatever. And that to me, I hadn't even thought of that as a possibility until I heard it.
It helps me a little bit to remember that they were once a baby. No, I know it sounds funny, but seriously, at one point, that was a baby, drinking from its mother's breast or a bottle or something. A pretty pure, innocent thing. Along the way,
Lots of things
stuff happened. But ultimately, at some point, I could have covered that person and said, oh.
About 100 million years ago, probably really 50 years ago, I read a book called I Love Idi Amin, and it was by a bishop, and I may not be pronouncing his name right, Kavenger. He was from Africa. And I lost the book, and it just breaks my heart because I can't find it on Amazon. But that book taught me to recognize the God aspect in every living human person. And I can love that person, God part, no matter what he is. I love Idi Amin. I think our generation knows who he was. He was horrible, and we still have horrible people all over the world. But there is an aspect of God in them. They weren't created out of nothing. God did create them. And I can recognize that, and that changed my life.
I think having been here 40 years and being senior warden twice, I've seen lots of opportunities in this church. And we've gone through some really rough patches, and I think I did more listening when some of those things were happening, because I may have not agreed with people, but I could understand where they were coming from. And so I had to respect that. And I've seen people, walk away from this church for issues that occurred in those 4 years. It always hurts me a little bit when they walk away, but I also respect their position.
One thing that helps when you're dealing with someone who's in your face and has gone completely nuts, is to back off and say, this person has been triggered, this person is injured, and this person, could have avoided all this, and sort of pull the pity card, if you will, to try to back yourself out of being hooked by whatever they're throwing at you.
Well, as we open with prayer, close with prayer as well. I thank you all for engaging in this. For those of you who are joining us online, thanks for being witnesses and standing with us. If you want to go back and look at this, we'll put it up. It was recorded. We'll refer to others. So, let us close. O God, I whom the meek are guided in judgment, and light shines up in darkness for God, grant us in all our doubts and uncertainties the grace to ask what you would have us to do, that the Spirit of wisdom may save us from all false choices, and that in your light we may see light, and in your straight path we not stumble. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's pretty sharp.
Yeah. She's,